I used to think my relationship with my dad was solid until Monica came into the picture. Growing up, it was always just the two of us after Mom passed away when I was 12. We weren't rich, but we had our little routines, inside jokes, and a bond that, at the time, felt unbreakable. Dad worked long hours, doing his best to provide, and I tried to be the daughter he could be proud of. But everything shifted when he met her, Monica. She was younger, glamorous in a way that felt out of place in our quiet suburban neighborhood. She had a way of making everything about herself, from casual dinners to family holidays, and Dad fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Suddenly, our simple little world wasn't enough for him anymore. It started with small things, Monica suggesting new furniture, redecorating the living room, casually moving my mom's old keepsakes to the attic without even asking. It stung, but I bit my tongue for Dad's sake. I inherited my grandpa's house when he passed away 5 years ago. It was my safe haven, the one thing in my life that felt stable. Grandpa always said, "Emily, this house is yours, no matter what." And when I officially moved in, it was the first time I felt like I was in control of my own life. The house wasn't much, but it was mine cozy, with its creaky wooden floors and the smell of old books Grandpa loved so much. Then Dad and Monica hit a rough patch with their finances, and before I knew it, they were moving in. "Just for a little while, Em," Dad had said, his voice hopeful. "We need a place to get back on our feet." I didn't have the heart to say no, so I let them in, hoping Monica could play nice. She didn't. The first few months were tolerable, though I could feel Monica testing the waters. She would comment on the house, subtly implying it wasn't modern enough for their taste. "We should paint the kitchen, Emily. It's so outdated," she'd say, twirling her perfectly manicured finger around a chipped cabinet handle. Dad, predictably, would nod in agreement. And then there was the baby. When Monica announced she was pregnant, I was happy for them, genuinely. I thought it might soften her sharp edges, make her more bearable, but instead it gave her more leverage. Suddenly, every conversation revolved around the baby and the changes they needed to make in the house. The nursery was the first thing on Monica's agenda, and it didn't take long for her to set her sights on my room. I should have seen it coming. Dad's tone shifted over dinner one night, the way it always did when he was about to ask me for something big. "Emily," he started, avoiding my eyes, "we need to talk." Monica was rubbing her belly, smiling sweetly, too sweetly. "With the baby coming, we need more space," she added, looking around like she already owned the place. "I think it's time you got your own place." I nearly dropped my fork. "What?" Dad sighed, rubbing his temple like this was as hard on him as it was on me. "Sweetheart, it's just, Monica needs to be comfortable. The baby will need their own room." I stared at him, stunned. "This is my house, Dad." Monica's lips twitched. "You're young, Emily. It's time you had a fresh start, don't you think?" The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. They weren't asking me, they were telling me. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'll think about it," I muttered, pushing away from the table. My heart was pounding, but deep down, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. What Monica and Dad had forgotten was that Grandpa hadn't just left me the house, he'd left me proof. And they were about to learn that the hard way. The tension in the house was unbearable after that dinner. Monica walked around like she already owned the place, humming nursery rhymes under her breath, and Dad avoided me like the plague. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, waiting for me to pack up my things and quietly leave. But I wasn't going anywhere. A few days later, Dad cornered me in the kitchen. I was making coffee when he walked in, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Emily," he started, his voice tight, "have you thought about what we talked about the other night?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, staring at him over the rim of my mug. "You mean when you and Monica decided I should leave my own house?" Dad winced. "Come on, sweetheart, don't put it like that. It's just, with the baby coming, we need the space." You're young. It's time you start thinking about getting your own place. I set my mug down with a little too much force. Dad, this is my place! Monica waltzed in right on cue, her hand resting on her growing belly like a badge of honor. Emily, it's not like we're throwing you out, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. We just need to make adjustments for the baby. You know how it is. I folded my arms. No, I don't think I do. Why don't you explain it to me? Monica's eyes darkened for a split second before she plastered on that saccharine smile again. Well, we've been looking at a few ideas online. We thought turning your room into a nursery would be perfect. It's got the best light and it's the quietest room in the house. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. So, let me get this straight. You want me to give up my room, my house, and figure out my life while you two settle in like you own the place? Dad's jaw tightened. It's not like that, Em. I thought you'd be more understanding. Understanding? I snapped. Dad, did you forget that Grandpa left this house to me? It's not yours to give away. Monica's expression didn't falter. You're still his daughter, Emily, and this baby is his future. Family sacrifices for each other. My stomach churned with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. I have sacrificed, Monica. I let you move in. I put up with your constant changes. But this is my home, and I'm not leaving. Dad's face turned red. Emily, don't be selfish. We've done so much for you. I shook my head slowly, my voice steady. No, Dad. Grandpa did so much for me. And you're trying to take it all away. Monica let out an exasperated sigh, turning to Dad. Honestly, Michael, I knew this would happen. She's too attached. Maybe we should just move things ourselves. Dad looked at me, his expression hardening. If you won't do it yourself, Emily, then maybe it's time I made the decision for you. I stared at him, my heart breaking into pieces. The man who had always been my protector was now siding with a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. I clenched my fists at my sides. You can try, I said quietly, but you'll regret it. Monica raised an eyebrow. Is that a threat? I smiled, though my blood was boiling. No, Monica, it's a promise. Later that night, I pulled out the file Grandpa had left me years ago, the original deed to the house, with my name on it, in bold letters. I traced my fingers over it, feeling a surge of determination. Dad and Monica thought they could push me out. They thought they could guilt me into leaving my own home. They had no idea what was coming. The next few days were a whirlwind of passive-aggressive comments and not-so-subtle hints from Monica. She walked around the house with a measuring tape, running her hands over the walls of my room, muttering things like, "This space will be perfect for the crib," and "We could paint it a soft pastel, maybe sage green." I caught Dad watching her with a mix of admiration and guilt, but whenever our eyes met, he looked away. Monica's antics escalated quickly. She began accidentally moving my things out of my room, stacking boxes in the hallway, and claiming she was just helping me get a head start. Every day, I found more of my belongings shoved into boxes without my permission, my books, my clothes, even my framed photos of Mom and Grandpa. Emily, you don't need all this clutter, Monica chirped one afternoon, waving a hand over a pile of my things. We're creating a new chapter for this family, and we need a fresh start. I crossed my arms, my patience wearing thin. This family? Monica, you moved in less than a year ago, and last I checked, I'm the one who actually owns this house. Dad sighed, stepping in before Monica could respond. Em, don't start. Monica's just trying to make things easier for everyone. Easier for her, you mean? I shot back. Monica's smile tightened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she started humming to herself as she continued packing up my things, completely ignoring me. I had enough. That night, I sat in my room, what was left of it, and pulled out Grandpa's deed again. My name was right there in black and white. No loopholes, no fine print. The house was legally mine, and it was time they remembered that. I had been holding back, hoping Dad would come to his senses, but it was clear Monica had him wrapped around her little finger. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen with the deed in hand. Monica was sitting at the table, sipping her green smoothie, scrolling through Pinterest nursery ideas. Dad was reading the paper like nothing was wrong. I dropped the deed onto the table in front of them. "Read it," I said, my voice calm but firm. Dad frowned and picked up the paper. His face paled as he scanned the document, his hands shaking slightly. Monica, on the other hand, barely glanced at it before rolling her eyes. "What's this supposed to prove, Emily?" I folded my arms. "It proves that this house is legally mine. Grandpa left it to me. You don't get to kick me out. In fact, if anyone needs to leave, it's you." Dad's jaw clenched. "Emily, come on. Let's not make this a big deal. We're family." "No, Dad. Family doesn't push each other out of their own home," Monica scoffed. "You can't seriously think you're just going to stay here while we're raising a baby in cramped quarters?" I smirked. "I can, and I will." Her face turned an angry shade of red. "Michael!" she whined, turning to Dad. "This is ridiculous! We can't raise a baby in that tiny guest room." Dad looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "Emily, please, just think about it. Maybe we can work something out?" I shook my head. "No, Dad. I've done enough thinking. It's my house and I'm not going anywhere." Monica slammed her smoothie down onto the table. "Fine. If you want to be selfish, then go ahead. But don't expect us to make this easy on you." She wasn't lying about that. Over the next week, Monica made it her mission to make my life miserable. She held loud phone calls at all hours, complaining to her friends about how unreasonable I was being. She forgot to do basic chores, leaving dirty dishes piled up and laundry sitting in the washing machine for days. And then there was the baby shower. One afternoon, I came home to find Monica in the living room with a group of women I'd never seen before. Pink and blue balloons were strung up everywhere, and the dining table was covered in gifts. "Oh, Emily," Monica cooed, her smile dripping with insincerity. "I hope you don't mind. We decided to have a little celebration for the baby." I clenched my fists. "A little celebration? In my house?" Dad walked in then, looking exhausted. "Em, it's just one afternoon. Let's not ruin this." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Enjoy your party," I said, turning on my heel and heading upstairs. But not before I heard Monica mutter to her friends, "Hopefully she'll get the hint and leave soon." That night, I decided it was time for phase 2 of my plan. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a friend of Grandpa's, who had helped finalize the house deed. I explained everything, and he assured me that I had every legal right to evict them if I wanted to. I told him to prepare the necessary documents. A few days later, I handed Dad a formal notice to vacate the premises within 30 days. He stared at the paper, his face a mix of shock and disbelief. "Emily, you don't have to do this." I looked at him, my heart aching. "I do, Dad. You made your choice." Monica snatched the notice out of his hands, reading it with wide eyes. "You can't be serious. You wouldn't actually kick us out." I smiled. "Oh, I would, and I am." The next few weeks were a tense waiting game. Monica threw tantrums daily, slamming doors and complaining to Dad about how unfair I was being. Dad tried to reason with me every chance he got, but I refused to budge. Then Monica did the unthinkable. She started showing the house to potential buyers behind my back. I came home early one afternoon to find her walking through the living room with a realtor. "And this is where the baby's going to play," she was saying. I crossed my arms. "Monica, what the hell is going on?" The realtor looked startled, but Monica just smiled. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Emily. We're just exploring our options." I laughed. "Explore all you want, but you're not selling my house." I turned to the realtor. "You can leave now." The realtor, sensing the tension, quickly gathered her things and left. Monica stormed past me, yelling, "You're ruining everything, Emily!" I smirked. "No, Monica, I'm taking back my home." It wasn't long before they realized I wasn't bluffing. With the eviction deadline looming, Monica packed her things in a flurry of frustration, huffing and muttering under her breath about entitled brats. Dad, looking weary and broken, just nodded at me as he carried boxes to their car. The day they left, I stood on the porch and watched them drive off. Dad rolled down the window. "You'll regret this one day, Em." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "No, Dad, I won't." And as their car disappeared down the street, I felt lighter than I had in months. The morning of the eviction deadline arrived with an eerie calm. The house, once filled with Monica's incessant humming and Dad's nervous pacing, felt different. It was quieter, lighter, like it was waiting to breathe freely again. I stood in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, listening to the clock ticking on the wall. Today was the day. I heard Monica before I saw her. Her voice carried down the stairs, sharp and frantic. "Michael, we can't just leave. She doesn't have the right to do this to us." Dad's voice was lower, wearier. "Monica, it's her house. We have no choice." I walked into the living room to find Monica pacing, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, glaring at the half-packed boxes scattered around. Dad was sitting on the couch, staring at his hands like a defeated man. I leaned against the doorframe. "Morning," I said, taking another sip of coffee. Monica spun on her heel, her eyes blazing with fury. "You think this is funny, Emily? Kicking your own father out onto the street? How heartless can you be?" I set my cup down carefully. "No one's being kicked out onto the street, Monica. You had a month to find somewhere else. That's more than fair." Dad looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Em, please, we could stay a little longer, just until the baby comes?" I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "No, Dad, I gave you time. This isn't just about the baby anymore, it's about respect. You tried to take my home away from me, and now it's time for you to go." Monica let out a bitter laugh, gesturing wildly. "Respect? You don't know the first thing about it. We're your family, Emily. You don't just throw family out." I took a step closer, my voice calm but firm. Family doesn't try to manipulate and guilt their way into stealing what isn't theirs. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd finally see reason. And family doesn't let it happen. His face twisted with guilt, but Monica wasn't done. She stalked toward me, her finger jabbing in my direction. "You're just jealous because we're building a life together, and you're stuck here all alone." I smiled, unfazed by her theatrics. "I'd rather be alone in my own house than live under someone else's rules in a place that isn't theirs." Monica's face contorted in frustration, and for a moment I thought she might actually lunge at me. But instead, she stormed off, muttering under her breath. Dad stood up slowly, his shoulders slumped. "Emily, I just wanted a fresh start. I thought having the baby here would be good for everyone." I softened just for a moment. "Dad, I get it, but this isn't the way to do it. You didn't just want a fresh start. You wanted to erase me from the picture, and that's not fair." He nodded, his eyes glassy. I thought Monica and I could build something new." I sighed. "Then build it somewhere else." Monica stomped back into the room with a suitcase in one hand and her phone in the other. "Fine, we'll leave, but don't expect us to come crawling back when you realize how much you've screwed up." I didn't flinch. "I'll take my chances." She shoved past me, the front door swinging open with force. Dad lingered a moment longer, looking at me with something close to regret. "Take care, Em," he said softly. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "You too, Dad." With that, he followed Monica to the car. I watched from the doorway as they drove off, Monica ranting animatedly in the passenger seat, while Dad stared straight ahead, gripping the wheel tightly. As their car disappeared around the corner, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The house was mine again, truly mine. I walked through each room, taking in the space that had been tainted by their presence. My belongings were still stacked in the hallway, my books packed away like I'd been preparing to leave. Not anymore. I started unpacking right then and there, placing my things back where they belonged. The weight that had been pressing down on me for months slowly lifted with each box I emptied. Later that afternoon, I found Grandpa's old armchair in the attic and dragged it back to the living room. Sitting in it, I could almost hear his voice telling me I'd done the right thing. A smile tugged at my lips. I had stood my ground, reclaimed what was rightfully mine, and in the process, I had rediscovered my strength. The first few days after Dad and Monica left were strange. The house felt eerily quiet without Monica's constant presence, and for the first time in months, I could hear myself think. There were no baby plans being whispered behind my back, no passive-aggressive remarks about how I should move on and start fresh. Just silence, and it was glorious. I spent the next few days reclaiming my space. I repainted my bedroom, rearranged the living room furniture, and even replaced a few things Monica had insisted on bringing into my home. It felt like I was breathing life back into the house, restoring it to what Grandpa had left me, a place filled with warmth, not tension. Dad texted a few times in the following weeks. At first, it was short and curt. "Hope you're happy." Then came the guilt trips. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own father. Blood is supposed to stick together, Em." I didn't reply. I wanted to. There was a part of me that still ached for the relationship we once had, before Monica, before the baby. But every time I reread those texts, I reminded myself of all the ways he let me down. He had chosen Monica over me. He had chosen to try and push me out of my own home. And that wasn't something I could easily forget. Monica, on the other hand, wasn't as subtle. Her messages were petty and biting. "Enjoy your empty little house, you bitter brat." I blocked her number after that one. Despite everything, I heard through a mutual friend that they had moved into a small apartment across town. Apparently, things weren't going as smoothly as Monica had hoped. The place was too small, too noisy, and apparently, the landlord wasn't nearly as accommodating as I had been. Funny how that works. I bumped into Dad at the grocery store a month later. He looked different, tired, older, like the weight of his choices was finally settling on him. "Hey," he said awkwardly, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets. "Hey, Dad," I replied, feeling a mix of emotions bubble up inside me. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." I took a deep breath, standing my ground. "I didn't have a choice. You forced my hand." Dad nodded slowly, looking down at his shoes. "Monica's not happy." I couldn't help but let out a small, bitter laugh. "That's not my problem, Dad." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I miss you, kid." And just like that, my heart cracked a little. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think he'd finally realized how much he'd hurt me. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down. Not yet. "I miss you too," I admitted softly. "But things can't go back to the way they were." He nodded again, this time with understanding. "I get it." That was the last time I saw him for a while. He still sent the occasional text, but it wasn't the same. The damage had been done, and I wasn't about to invite that chaos back into my life. As for me, I was thriving. With Monica and Dad gone, I finally felt like I had control over my life again. I started taking on more freelance work, fixed up the garden Grandpa had loved so much, and even hosted a small dinner party with friends, something I never could have done with Monica running the show. And the best part? I could finally walk through my own front door without feeling like an outsider. A year later, I stood in the front yard, admiring the blooming flowers I had planted in Grandpa's honor. The house finally felt like mine again, not just legally, but emotionally. The weight of the past had lifted, and I was at peace. Dad reached out every now and then, mostly with awkward attempts at conversation. "Hope you're doing well," he'd text, and I'd reply with a simple, "You too." It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. Monica, as expected, had moved on to another man, another opportunity. Dad, on the other hand, was still trying to figure things out. I wished him well, but I knew better than to let him back in too soon. Sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand, I smiled to myself. I had fought for my place, for my home, and most importantly, for myself. And I had won